Focaccia is a flat Italian style of bread, and it comes in sweet and savory forms, but fresh from the oven, it's always delicious. I'll start things off with the basics, making a rosemary onion focaccia. I love making focaccia by hand. It's easy to do. I have 2.5 cups of water, and it's warmed just above body temperature. Put this in a big bowl. And of course, yeast is a common ingredient to so many styles of Italian bread. 2¼ teaspoons. There we go. Something common to focaccia recipes is the addition of olive oil. I'll measure in 2 tablespoons. Now, if you've ever made pasta from scratch before, you've probably seen a call for durum semolina. Durum is a variety of wheat, and it's processed in a different way than regular all-purpose flour. It's a little more coarse, which means it absorbs moisture as the yeast rises. So, adding 1/2 cup, give this a little stir. Before I start adding the flour, I want to measure it out separately. 5½ cups. I'm using all-purpose flour. The reason I pre-measure is so that I don't lose count of how many cups I've added to my dough. And you want to start adding a cup at a time and blending after each addition. At this point, if you see lumps, that's okay, because I've got a lot more to add. Making bread from scratch takes time and a little bit of attention. So enjoy it. Savor the fact that you're taking time to make bread from scratch. Now, it's taking a bit more strength to mix. So I'll use this flour on my work surface, a generous amount, because I know I need to add more. And even though it still is quite sticky, I'm going to turn it out onto the work surface. And this is where you just have to get in there with your hands. The heel of your hand is how you mix and knead the dough. Stretch it out, and also they're your measuring guide, so you can tell when you have achieved that proper elastic consistency in the dough as you're kneading it. And it sits upright in a ball. It doesn't flatten out or sag, so I know I've kneaded it just the right amount. And now we have to let the yeast do its thing. I'll just put a little olive oil in a big bowl. Make sure you choose a bowl big enough to allow the dough to rise up and not hit the plastic wrap. Keep it in a warm place, and it takes about 90 minutes to rise. And look how it transforms. Oh, it's just so delicate. I love making bread from scratch, can you tell? And you can see all the little air bubbles that the yeast produced. But now, I need to challenge that yeast again by rolling the dough out flat. First thing I'll do is cut the dough in half, because this is making 2 focaccia loaves. And with a rolling pin, roll it out into a rectangle about 10 by 15. I want to keep it about a 1/2 inch thick. I have 2 baking trays, each lined with parchment paper, and I'm going to take a sprinkle of that durum semolina and sprinkle it evenly over the parchment. That helps prevent the bread from sticking, but it adds also a bit of a crunch too. And then I put the focaccia in the pan, and you don't have to have it fit perfectly. It's supposed to look handmade. Now, of course, I've rolled out all the air within the bread, so I have to let the yeast rise up again. Oh, think of the flavor this bread is going to develop. It takes another 90 minutes, and you need to cover the trays with a tea towel. I have 2 sheets of focaccia here that have had the 90 minutes to rise up, and you can see they've doubled in size. What you need to do with just the tops of your fingers is dimple the bread. This will ensure that the focaccia does bake up evenly. And it is common to add toppings and flavor accents to your focaccia. I think rosemary and red onion is a brilliant combination. I have 1/2 of a red onion that I've sliced up, as well as 2 tablespoons of fresh rosemary. You want to completely coat this with olive oil, so it takes 3 to 4 tablespoons. Combine it all together, and then a little sprinkle on each. And then as I'm spreading the onions, I ensure that with my oily fingers, I'm patting the surface of the bread. The final addition, just a light sprinkle of coarse sea salt. These are now ready for the oven. I've preheated it to 400 degrees. To get a nice, even browning on the bread and develop just that perfect amount of crust, you want to get some moisture into the oven. So what I like to do is I use a mister to spray into the oven right before I close the door. And you want to work fast so you don't let the heat out of the oven, and give it a spray. All right. And look at the beautiful golden brown color on the focaccia. What you need to do is immediately from the oven, Remove the focaccia from the baking tray onto a cooling rack. That way, air can circulate all the way around the bread, and you'll avoid any condensation, moisture building up underneath. I'll take these back to my cooling rack to cool, and I have some focaccia that's already had the chance to cool down. And look at the beautiful golden brown color on the focaccia. It's traditional to serve the focaccia in squares. Show off that beautiful interior. To bring homemade bread to the table is truly something special.